welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone is having a good new year so far. So the last thing that was posted here was a video of the giant costume that I made for Jack the Beanstalk, the pantomime. So if anyone wants to check that out, there it is. And since I posted that, I had like a few people asking like how, what the process of that was. How did you make that? Because obviously it was a very big project. But in fact, probably the biggest project I've worked on, to be honest. So I thought I would just kind of go into some detail about how I made that and like why I made it and like what it was for, how it came to be, what the process was. And I'm gonna do this unscripted, so I'm gonna try not to miss anything out. But yeah, so hopefully I can kind of cover everything there. So I was commissioned by Immersion Theatre, who are a theatre company in the UK. They work on a lot of pantomimes, a few other shows, kind of like family-friendly shows. I think they tour a bit, they do all kinds of stuff. They're a really, really amazing company. And they contacted me after I contacted them, like literally probably like a year ago, when I was looking for theatre jobs, looking for work in the theatre. So I sent out a lot of emails, basically just asking around, like if there's any jobs, if anyone wants to collaborate, have me work on anything. And they eventually got back to me last year, so it was kind of early last year. They got back to me with a commission for a cow costume for Jack the Beanstalk, which I did post a video of the cow. You can see that further down on the channel. And the cow was basically just a fursuit. It was a full body, which is kind of unusual for me. I don't make a lot of full body suits. But it's basically just a fursuit, so I don't really feel the need to make a video sort of explaining that. I think it's self-explanatory, it's just a fursuit mascot costume. But with the giant, like, I think it's a bit more complicated. And honestly, originally I wanted to do like a vlog kind of thing while I worked on it. I was hoping to like record during the process of making it and just talk about like where I was at. But honestly, I just spent that long making the thing and figuring out how to make it, because I never made anything like this before, that I just really did not have the time to do that. That would have been impossible. So I thought I'll do my best to try and talk about how it was made, the process of it. So the original commission was to make the giant for Jack the Beanstalk, the pantomime, which was going to be at Christmas. And so to begin with, the theatre, they were super helpful to work with. They were very clear on what they wanted, which was so helpful because honestly I've never made anything like this. I had no idea how to go about it. So to begin with, they sent me some pictures of giant costumes that were already existing, that were used for different shows. They sent me some links to videos so I could have a look at like how these things are made. And the first step to making this was obviously to design. So I came up with some designs for the giant. We discussed a little bit beforehand and we decided to go with sort of a punk look for the giant, which I was super excited about. I thought that'd be amazing. Because obviously with pantomimes, they're old stories, but they usually have kind of a modern take, or every theatre will do it a bit differently, which I really appreciate. So, you know, these are stories that have been around for years and years, but every theatre and every pantomime will do a different take on it. So having like a punk looking giant was kind of a way to have a bit of a modern take on a very old story that would normally be set in sort of, well, I don't know when Jack the Beanstalk is set, maybe like medieval times, I don't know. But yeah, so we settled on a design. I did a few different ones, and then once we decided on one, which was this one, we then did some kind of discussions about how it would be made. So they sent me some very basic kind of sketches of like how it could be worn, and then I took one of my designs, made it kind of faded, and drew over the top like where the wearer would be inside the costume, which was a pretty good way to like figure out how it's going to look and to send to them to like ask if that looks okay. And it was fine. So then I was ready to start on the costume. The first part of the costume I worked on were the feet, because I wanted to do the easiest bits first, because I kind of thought, okay, at least if I do the bits I know how to do first, at least those are done, and then I can spend the rest of the time figuring out how to make the rest of it. So the feet were very, very simple. They were kind of like fursuit feet, but just a lot bigger. So the wearer's feet would be like flat on the ground. So their feet would just be in the giant's feet. And then the trousers would kind of go a bit higher than like regular trousers. And then the top half of the giant was really where the height is. So they would have been looking through the chest, and then the head and the shoulders would have been kind of up here. So the feet were made out of foam. They were just sculpted hollow foam, very lightweight. Not a lot of complications to that, to be honest. They had EVA foam soles, which are good for outdoor use or lots of use on stage. And the top bit of the boots were also made from EVA foam. The inside was lined with fleece. They were kind of a one-size-fits-all because I didn't know who was going to be wearing this, so I made kind of an average size. And then the boots were covered with black vinyl fabric, which is like fake leather, just to give it that sort of like leather look. And then the buckles on the boots and the flames on the front, which you can see in the photos, we ended up scrapping because the design just wasn't coming together that way. But yeah, the boots were just vinyl and foam, that's literally all. So the boots kind of came up to like sort of here on the wearer. Nothing complicated there, those were easy to make. Then after working on the boots, I moved on to the trousers. We settled on kind of a purple tartan fabric for the trousers, which I really liked. I really want to make myself something with that fabric. Again, just very normal pattern for sort of trousers that look like oversized pajamas. I made them really, really big because the plan was that they would be kind of out here, and then the wearer would wear like elastic suspenders. So it was like a round kind of top, and then it had like two pieces of elastic that crossed over to keep them in place. After trying on the whole costume, this is skipping forward, we realised that actually the legs needed something to kind of hold the shape. So the legs actually ended up having like a foam band around the top, just to hold the shape, kind of like I think they often do with like clown trousers. You can use a hula hoop to sort of keep them like that kind of shape. But that was quite simple to do. So then the next piece I worked on, which was a bit more complicated, was the head. So the head was just hollow foam, like this head, except there was no vision because the wearer wasn't going to be looking through the head. But this was a lot bigger than a fursuit head, so it was kind of like this. And the head was purely just 1-inch upholstery foam, that's all it was, sculpted. I just sculpted it the same way I do the fursuit heads. There's not really a lot else I can say about that. And then for the details and the skin and all the kind of covering, I used fleece fabric, so the face, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the teeth, the ears is all covered in fleece fabric. And then the nose ring, which was a design choice, and also the ear piercings were made of a silver vinyl to look like metal. And his hair was made from fake fur, the same fake fur on these kind of costumes, to give it that really kind of bright, fluffy look. The head, honestly, was tricky to make, but it's not that complicated of a process. It's just sculpting. And I think if you're going to make a giant costume of your own, it's going to look different depending on what your kind of style is. But it is just a case of sculpting, and I think each one is going to look different depending on what you want to do with it. But anyway, the head was completely hollow, so I then was going to make the kind of harness that the wearer would wear. And this was the hardest bit, honestly, figuring out the structure, because this is so different to anything I've done before. So to begin with, we had a piece of EVA foam, which is like a sort of firm foam board kind of thing, and it was a square piece like this. Then I had 2 backpack straps, which were actual backpack straps that came off my backpack that broke like a week before. But you could easily make your own with the kind of backpack clips and just some pieces of fabric. But I used actual ones because I had them and it was going to be stronger with proper ones. So I attached them to the foam square. So it was like a backpack, but it was just a square of foam on the back. After that, I needed to add the poles. So I had 3 plastic poles, like sort of long plastic tubes. One was really long, which was going to go all the way from the back of the square piece at the back all the way up into the giant's head and be held in place. Then I had these two other ones which crossed over on the sides and were going to be up to his shoulders. So we had a long pole and two shorter poles. The giant's head wasn't staying up properly like this, so I ended up having to cut open the back of the head and add another pole that just went across, a short one kind of like this. Honestly, not a complicated thing to do. It made all the difference. It stopped the head from flopping around. So yeah, basically just 3 plastic poles going into the backpack. Then I added kind of these pockets made out of fleece just to keep them in place, because gluing or stitching the poles to the foam was not going to work. That would not have stayed in place. So they were in these kind of fabric pockets that were then glued for a bit of extra support. So we had the basic structure then. The next step was to then figure out kind of the top half, the rest of the top half. So at the moment, the giant was just a head and this backpack structure. So the 2 poles where the shoulders were, I added 2 more pieces of EVA foam, which were just flat. So these were going to be his shoulders. So it was the head, flat EVA foam, these plastic poles, and the square of EVA foam with the backpack straps. So I cut some holes into these pieces of EVA foam, added that onto the top of the poles. So the middle pole went through it and the 2 other poles kind of stopped where that was. And then his head went onto the middle pole. So we had the basic structure for the shoulders then. The next step was to make his shirt. So this was quite simple. Just used a white sort of cotton fabric for the shirt, very lightweight. It was sort of floating around when the wearer wore it or when I modelled it for the videos. It was supposed to do that. Actually added patches to his shirt, which was a clever way to hide the vision area. So at the moment, the wearer's head was kind of level with the giant's chest. So I cut a hole in the chest and added a piece of buckram mesh, which is the same thing I used for the eyes on these costumes, which was painted to look like a patch on his shirt. So it was a way for the wearer to be able to see through it and walk around and be able to see actually quite well. The vision in the giant was surprisingly good. I mean, I'm someone who's used to wearing these kind of costumes, but the vision was pretty good. And then I added some more very similar looking patches just to hide it, so it just looked like another patch on the shirt. Honestly, not a complicated process. It's just, this was a very big project and I work from a very small room, so not ideal. After the shirt, then the next step was to do kind of the back. We decided that the giant would wear like a leather vest. So I did the back piece, which was just a piece of black vinyl at the back. I added like a flame design that we'd discussed, which was just yellow and orange vinyl attached to the back. That wasn't complicated. So the back piece was then attached to the back of the structure and the white pieces were at the front. I then added these 2 more black pieces that came around the sides to just kind of make it look like a jacket and not just like a cape kind of thing, and attach that all together. And then the next step was to make the arms, which was quite complicated. So the arms were going to be longer, obviously, than the wearer's arms. So if you can imagine where everything is now with me trying to explain it, the head is up here, the chest is here, so the person's looking through the chest. Then the person's arms are going to be just down by the side, so they're really only going to come up to sort of here on the giant. So then we had these 2 plastic poles that were going to be used to control the arms. So again, 2 more plastic poles. Then I built the arms just out of foam and just plush kind of method. Again, this is going to depend on your style. It's just a case of sculpting. So the arms were sort of sculpted out of these pieces of hollow foam, and then the plush hands were at the end. And again, covered in fleece, just to give him the kind of skin. He was at one point going to be holding a club, which you can see in the video. It's kind of flopping down in the video like this. At the end, we decided that it just wasn't coming together, having the club. It just wasn't staying up the way we wanted it to, and it just wasn't, we didn't have enough time at that point for me to figure that out. So I decided to scrap that. Well, we all decided to scrap that. So in the end, he didn't have a club, he just had 2 big hands. And then the top half of the arms were also going to be part of his shirt. So he had these kind of shirt sleeves that came to here. So the part that was like the green fleece and sculpted hands had these handles at the end, which were the poles inside that the wearer could hold onto. And then the top parts of the arms were attached to the rest of the structure, and they were just made of foam and covered with the white fabric from his shirt. So there was kind of like a loose bit of fabric at the end which would cover the wearer's hands. So when they were holding onto the poles, there'd be kind of a piece of fabric here, so when it was on stage moving around, you wouldn't be able to see that there was a person inside. So after that, it was just a case of adding like detail with some spiky cuffs to his wrists. Those were purely a design choice. They didn't serve any purpose other than to look good. And I also added a collar, which was also a design choice, but that also helped to hide kind of the seams. So we had like a spiky collar and spiky cuffs. And then after that, that was pretty much the whole thing done on my part. The only thing after that was just a few finishing touches like hiding seams, making sure everything fit, trying it on, taking photos, things like that. When the giant got sent off to the theatre, someone came to pick him up, which was really helpful because I would not have even wanted to try shipping that out. He went off to the theatre. They actually made some changes to him, which I didn't see until I got to see the show, which was really good. They just kind of rounded off the shoulders, did a few things that I really didn't know how to do or just wasn't aware of that kind of made him look better. And they did a fantastic job with that, just making him look a bit more professional and just a bit better. Obviously, this was the first time making something like this, so it's kind of good to get a second pair of eyes to look at it and just see what else actually could look good that maybe I missed or didn't see properly the first time. So I got to see the show just before Christmas. It was fantastic. It is fantastic seeing something that you've made yourself on stage. It is truly a surreal feeling. It's something that I have wanted to be able to do for years and just wasn't really expecting it to happen at such a soon time. Yeah, so that was fantastic. Getting to work on this and see it on stage, really a dream job just to come true. And I really hope to be able to work on something like this again in future. And I hope that me explaining the process was actually helpful or at least interesting. Did my best to kind of describe it properly, although I know this is complicated, so some things might not come across properly. But anyway, yes, that's pretty much how it all came together. And yeah, this was a fantastic company to work with. It was such a fun but also incredibly challenging project, but that's the best thing. I mean, getting to try new projects and work on things that I've never worked on before. So yeah, that's pretty much all. If there's anything that I might have missed, feel free to leave me a comment and ask any questions. I don't mind explaining this kind of thing. I know giant costumes get made a lot for theatres, but I'm more than happy to answer questions and help wherever I can. And yeah, if you want to hear any more about like theatre jobs and projects that I've done, feel free to leave me a comment and let me know if that's something that you want to hear about or if there's something in particular you want to hear about. And I hope this was an interesting description or interesting kind of story in a way. So I will see you all next time.